In this alternate history, the United States doesn't make it through the 2028 election with one nation intact.
This story is fictional. It's based on real events, but everything beyond the known facts is speculation. Our goal is to explore an alternate timeline, not to rewrite history, but to imagine what might have been.
On a warm Wednesday in July of 2026, Todd Blanche sat before the Senate Judiciary Committee and answered a question that should have been simple. A senator asked whether President Trump was eligible to run for a third term. Blanche, the nominee to become Attorney General, gave the answer the Constitution demands. He said no. The 22nd Amendment is clear. 2 terms and no more. It was a moment inside a long, brutal hearing. They grilled him about the Epstein files, about Trump's settlement with the IRS, about his loyalty to the man who had once been his client. His answer on the third term barely made the headlines that night, but it drew a line. The chief law enforcement officer of the country was on record. The president could not stay past January of 2029. But what if Blanche had answered differently? What if, instead of saying no, he had paused, looked at the senators, and told them the question was more complicated than people assumed? That there were legal theories worth exploring? That the amendment's language could be read narrowly? That single hedge would have everything. The clip would have gone viral within the hour. Not because anyone believed the legal theory, but because the nominee for Attorney General had refused to rule it out. Overnight, a fringe idea would become an official possibility. In the House, allies would draft resolutions praising the president's unwork. Cable panels would argue about whether a president could run as vice president and then ascend. Legal scholars who had spent their careers in obscurity would suddenly find book deals and primetime slots waiting for them. The guardrail hadn't broken. Someone had simply declared it optional. The first real crack would come in the states. Election officials, already exhausted and threatened, would start receiving conflicting guidance. A handful of secretaries of state, loyal to the administration, would announce they were studying whether to place the president's name on the 2028 ballot. Others would refuse outright. For the first time, Americans would face a presidential candidate appearing on the ballot in some states and banned in others. Then the courts would frack. Lawsuits would fly in every direction. A federal judge in Texas would rule the amendment ambiguous, while a judge in California called the idea an assault on the Constitution. The cases would race toward a Supreme Court that no longer commanded the country's trust. Whatever the justices decided, half the nation would reject it. A 5-4 ruling on whether the president could seek a third term would not settle anything. It would light the fuse. Inside the justice, Blanche would now be the man enforcing the ambiguity. Prosecutors who resisted found themselves reassigned or fired. Investigations into election officials who refused to comply would begin quietly, then loudly. The department that once prosecuted crimes would become the instrument deciding who was allowed to run the country. Career lawyers would resign in waves, their letters posted online, each one a small alarm bell in a building going dark. By the summer of 2028, the country would no longer be arguing about policy. It would be arguing about whether there was still a country to govern. Governors of large states would declare they would not recognize a third Trump term under any circumstances. State legislatures would pass laws instructing their electors to ignore federal guidance. The machinery of a national election, the thing Americans had trusted for over 2 centuries, would splinter into 50 separate machines running different software. The economy would feel it before the politicians admitted it. Markets hate uncertainty, and there is no uncertainty deeper than not knowing who will hold power. Foreign investors would pull their money out. The dollar would wobble. Credit agencies would warn about the constitutional risk premium on American debt, and ordinary people would watch their retirement accounts shrink while the men on television shouted about legal theories. Then the streets. Protests fill the cities, first peaceful, then not. When the administration invoked emergency powers to protect the electoral process, troops would appear in the capitals of states that had refused to comply. Governors would call up their own National Guard units and order them to stand against federal forces. For the first time since the Civil War, armed Americans in uniform would face each other across state lines, each side certain it was defending the Constitution. The election of November 2028 would never produce a clean result. Some states would report totals, others would refuse. Rival slates of electors would each claim legitimacy. On January 6th of 2029, two ceremonies would take place. One certifying the president for a third term, one declaring vacant. Two men would claim to be the lawful head of state. Two chains of command would issue orders to the same soldiers. That is where the road ends. Not with a coup in a single dramatic night, but with a slow unraveling that began with a nominee who would not say a simple word. The United States would still exist on maps. But the thing that made it a nation, the agreement that power changes hands by rule, not by force, would be gone. Neighbors would stop trusting neighbors. Soldiers would wait for orders they were afraid to obey. And somewhere in the wreckage, people would remember that it all traced back to a hearing room in July, where one man was asked whether the law still meant what it said, and chose, just for a moment, not to answer.
In this world, history went one way. But here, we ask what could have happened. If you want more alternate timelines and government what-ifs, subscribe, comment your theory, and stay tuned. This is State of What If.